Welcome to this week's edition of Dugout Dish Podcast. I'm Andy Kirikides, joined by my wonderful co-host, Keith Glasser. How we doing?
Great. How are you?
Special guest on tonight. Pretty fired up for this one. He played with one of my favorite players that I coached in college, Cullen Large. But I'll shout out Cullen. I'll kick it over to you, Keith, for the intro.
Sure. Tonight we're joined by one of my former players. A very long time ago. I think we're recording this on the 31st. I think the podcast that went out today, I had brought him up, and I texted him that night last week when we recorded, and he was, had just announced that he was retiring from professional baseball, and was like, "Yo, I'll jump on." And I couldn't have been more fired up. I am super excited to have one of my favorite kids that I ever coached. But tonight we're joined by newly retired professional baseball player, Kevin Smith. Kev, thanks for joining us, man.
Thanks for having me, man. I'm excited.
Yeah, fired up. Before we get going, just give the listeners a quick rundown of your career in baseball, and then we'll get into the podcast and talk baseball.
Yeah, so I grew up in upstate New York, right outside of Albany. Went to Columbia High School, played baseball since I was about 3 years old, was playing all the sports growing up. Was just lucky to kind of grow up in a neighborhood of a lot of sports and a lot of athletes. We were playing basketball, baseball, football, soccer, whatever it was, whatever time of year it was, we were playing it. We had a bunch of athletes on our street, and so sports was always just a big thing for me. My mom was a cheerleader, which she always says is a sport, and my dad played basketball into college. So it was just a big sports family. We were always watching sports, playing sports. Played all the way up till high school, Columbia High School, played for the South Troy Dodgers. Ended up going to the University of Maryland for 3 years, got drafted out of Maryland by the Toronto Blue Jays in 2017. Played with the Blue Jays until 2022, and then made my debut in 2022, got traded to the Oakland Athletics in the Matt Chapman deal. Played with them for 2 years, and then last year signed with the New York Yankees, played with them for a year. I now have 2 little kids. Felt like it was my time to get out. Had a great ride. My family and wife were super supportive, but it was time to move on and see the family a little bit more, live in one spot for more than a few months. And so retired this year, and now I live in Arizona and hanging out with the family, having fun, and get to do some more cool stuff like this.
Yeah, I love it. It's I brought you up the other night, and I know I texted you this, but I brought it up because we cut a podcast on you didn't make the varsity team, and Dawn, I remember, and I said this, like your sophomore year, we didn't put you on the varsity team, and I remember fighting tooth and nail with Coach Dietrich, who was like, he's better served getting way more at bats on JV right now because he needs that for his development. And at the time, I was like, yo, he's better. Like, I remember watching you take ground balls when you were 14. I was like, yo, that's what a Division I shortstop looks like. Like, it just like, it was there, right? And like, for people who listen, like, when you do this long enough, like, you know what it looks like, and you had it. Now, all the intangibles that eventually got you to the big leagues is for another day, and probably later in this podcast. But, I just thought, like, to open it up, like, I think that there's value in understanding that, like, it's not necessarily a setback, that the more you actually get to play, the better served you are. Because if memory serves, you went and played on the 18U South Troy team that summer because Cogswell, who was playing shortstop at UVA in the national championship run, he was a freshman at UVA at the time. And they bumped you straight up, which, I think was a little bit of a struggle right away. But I don't know if you got there having not played and gotten 60, 70 at-bats that spring, if we just sat you on the bench or, played you sparingly. So I think just, if we could get into just, what's your feel on the development side of where, your younger age of where it got you to eventually get to play for Coach Sheff at Maryland.
Yeah, I mean, you got to play, right? I mean, you obviously have to practice, but if you're practicing all year and you're not playing, you're not going to transfer those skills over. And so, I just remember having a goal of making varsity as a sophomore. That was, back then, almost nobody played as a freshman. It was almost unheard of. I think I was 5'3" and maybe a buck 30 my freshman year, so I had no shot. I remember sophomore year, working out in the basement, trying to make varsity. And then I just remember getting the call that I was going to be on JV as a sophomore and knowing I had all these big goals. And I was like, what is this going to mean for going to college? I knew a lot of guys on the varsity team. I always played up in baseball, so they were all my friends, wanting to play with them. And it was just like, look, we had T. Hart at the time, Tyler Hart, who was probably one of the best athletes ever to come through Columbia. And he was a shortstop, and it was like, dude, you're not gonna be able to develop, and you're not gonna be able to play the way you want to. And I think you or Dietrich might have had a talk with my dad, and my dad was like, Kev just wants to play, like wherever. I just want to make sure that he's playing in the game. And so if that's not at varsity, put it to JV or not. We don't really care. It's not gonna be a thing with him. He's still gonna work, and he's still gonna play, and it's gonna be what it's gonna be. If he's good enough and he's gonna play, do it. But if not, let's put him somewhere where he can play and keep developing, and we can kind of grow my game. And so, I ended up committing to Maryland before I ever played varsity baseball. And looking back on it, like I said, I don't know if you know the story of the Chinese farmer, but it's one of my favorite stories ever. And it's about this old Chinese farmer, and a bunch of stuff happens to him, and everyone comes over. One day he loses a horse, and everyone comes over in the town and goes, man, you just lost your horse. Like, that's terrible. How are you ever going to get back from this? And he would just keep saying, maybe. And a week later, the horse comes back with 10 horses, and everyone comes back, and they all go, man, that was the greatest thing that ever happened to you. Like, aren't you so excited? And he just kept saying maybe. And the story just keeps going on and on. And it's just kind of, this theory that you don't really know what's good or bad until you look back on it 10, 15, 20 years later. And so in the moment of it, you just need to keep taking it with a grain of salt, keep the end vision and the end goal in mind, and really just know what you want to do and just kind of keep going after that. And you don't know what's good or bad until you look back on it years later. And so trying to put a good or bad on things when they're happening in the moment is probably one of the hardest things you can do in your career. And so just kind of staying to developing and playing is probably the most important thing. And that's what I ended up doing. And at the end of the day, just trying to prove people wrong, and obviously committing to Maryland before I made varsity was a chip on my shoulder back then. But looking back on it now, it's only because of guys like you, Dietrich, and obviously my dad probably had a little influence on that as well. Just knowing what's going to be good in the long run, and really trusting that.
Yeah, I think we had plenty of conversations, your father and I, and Coach Dietrich and I, but I think that the overarching theme is that it's not obviously the end of the world if you're a younger kid who doesn't make the varsity team right away. Like, it's the development piece comes by actually playing in games. And if you're not going to actually go play, you have to do something, you can't just practice and think that that's always going to convert into game success. And this game is far too hard. Like, you have to be able to figure things out while you're actually playing it in order to continue to develop at the rate in which it is that you want. I remember, for the listeners, it was a different time where you could commit a lot earlier, back 10, 15 years ago, where you were able to commit pretty much, whenever the heck it was that you wanted to commit. Whereas now, that wouldn't have necessarily happened. Like, you could have went to camp and they would have really liked you and then offered you eventually. But under today's rules, it is a little bit different, where that isn't necessarily bound to happen as often as it may have. And I remember when you committed, I didn't think it was a bad idea at all. John Sheff is one of the best coaches in college baseball. They're coming off a sweep at Virginia Tech of Wake Forest at Wake, and playing for him is, I think Andy played for him too, didn't you, Andy?
That was the intent. Coach Sheff left about a week into my first fall season to go to Louisiana Lafayette. But I committed because of that guy. Like, I sat down in front of him and I'm like, I want to play for him. And I'm sure you probably have a similar sentiment. And you played for Rob Vaughn, who, for my money, is as good of an offensive coach as there is in college baseball. But yeah, Sheff was the reason I went to Marist. I wanted to play for that guy. Unfortunately, I didn't. So
Yeah, I mean, my story is pretty weird. I wanted to play in college. My top two schools at the time were Stanford and Wake Forest, and this was back when Wake was they were okay, but I kind of saw some really cool things happening with Tim Walters at the time. They would talk a lot about development. They were putting a lot of resources toward it, and so Maryland was reaching out, and I really wanted to go to a camp at Wake Forest. And so me and my dad came up with a plan of going to Maryland as just a practice run of what to expect at these camps. Because back then, there wasn't, I mean, obviously, guys at South Troy had a lot of experience with the college recruiting process, but it wasn't like it is now where you have all these podcasts and you have people you can reach out to on social media, whatever it is. A lot of people know more about it than back then. Back then, I mean, I remember talking to you, Glass, about it, everyone at South Troy, but it was like you didn't know what you were going to get into. You couldn't see all these videos online of what it was like. And so it was, okay, I'll go to Maryland to try out basically, so that when I go to Wake Forest and hopefully get an invitation out west to Stanford, I kind of know what I'm doing. And I showed up to Maryland, was completely blown away. It was just kind of made to happen. Chef was supposed to be on the recruiting trail. It was just supposed to be Swope, and his flight got delayed. And so Chef just said, you know what, I'm going to stay and I'm going to work this camp. And after the day one, I played well. He invited me to tour the campus. We spent about 5 hours with Chef. And I remember going home and talking to my dad, and I'm like, that's a dude that I want to play for. It wasn't about any of the facilities. They weren't great at the time. It wasn't the facilities. It wasn't any of the cool gear. It was like, I can see myself going to bat and, giving it my all for that guy. And ended up having another day the next day, met with him again after, and they offered me on the spot. And I just remember saying no, and I had to go. We were going right from Maryland to Wake Forest. So I left Maryland. I said, well, think about it. We have a camp at Wake Forest, drove to Wake Forest, was super impressed by everything there. It just didn't feel like it was that fit for me, versus when I was at Maryland, I was like, this is the spot that I can see myself going to school. I can see hanging out with these guys. I can see this being an atmosphere where I can get better. And so I called Chef, still in Wake Forest's parking lot, after getting offered more money and probably a better role at Wake Forest. And I called him with my Wake Forest t-shirt on and committed to the University of Maryland. And my dad still has that picture in his phone. He always shows it to guys when we're talking to just different local guys or whatever it is about recruiting or the process. You really never know where it's going to take you. So committed to him on the phone, drove up to Maryland the next day, now committed, met Chef again. And I just remember on the way home, my parents talking about how they were so comfortable making that decision because they could see Chef being a guy that they could leave their kid with for a whole year when they don't see him. And like that, to me, now being a dad, if your parents can be like, wow, I can see my kid leaving, not living at home, and I can trust this guy to like develop you not only as a baseball player, but as a man and a human. I think that part probably doesn't get talked about enough. And I think that's where, and you can chime in too. It's like, that's kind of what did it for me and my family, was like, this guy's going to have your best interests at heart. You feel like he's really giving you the truth. And so I ended up committed to Maryland. The next week, Stanford reached out and wanted me to go out west, and I never had the chance to go out there. But my good friend now, Nico Horner, ended up going out there and playing shortstop for 3 years. So like I said, everything kind of happens for a reason. Obviously, Wake became a powerhouse, and it was cool to kind of see what they did. But I mean, I was so lucky to join Maryland when I did with the teams that we had there. And so I just feel like everything kind of fits. Everything kind of goes together as long as you're just doing your part, putting in the work. It always seems to work out how it's supposed to.
It's funny that you bring up Wake, because the last question we ask coaches is, what's the advice that you would give players and parents who are going through the process? And we had Billy Soleno on. We've known Billy for a while, and we had him on, and we're able to pick his brain on some stuff. And his answer to that question was verbatim what you just said, which is everybody's got nice facilities. Everybody's got the ability to develop guys, But at the end of the day, it comes down to relationships and being with people that you feel like when you're done with that program on the backside of it, you're going to come out a better person. So for those of you listening who listened to Billy's podcast, it's not fluff. Like, it is such a big part of your experience, and the people you surround yourself with during the recruiting process are obviously important. But when you get dropped off on that college campus, you want to know that you're playing for somebody who's truly cares about getting the best out of you. And obviously that was the feeling you had with Coach Sheff. It's the same feeling I had, except I didn't get a chance to play for him, but I had the same exact reaction, which I walked away and was like, yeah, I want to play for that guy. So for those of you listening, the people that you experience your college career with are going to have a massive impact on it. And make sure you do your homework. Make sure you feel really comfortable about the people that you're going to be with, because ultimately they're the ones who are going to be responsible for your development in a lot of ways. So it's cool to hear you highlight how that was really the kind of the thing that tipped you towards Maryland. And it worked out pretty good.
Yeah, and I mean, just to take it further, I mean, when I committed to Maryland, I was 5th on their shortstop depth chart. I wasn't handed the job. Chef said, we have a lot of good players coming in. We have a really good team right now, even though I think that year they went like 9-40 something or whatever it was, or 9-20 in the ACC. When I committed, we were still in the ACC, and he goes, I believe in the guys that I have. Like, they're going to get better. We're going to bring in good guys, but no one's going to get handed anything. If you come in and you dominate, you're going to be the one playing. And I mean, Keith, you can kind of attest to this. Like, that's kind of how I had it my whole life, right? Like, from high school to Sal Troy, it was where it's a lot of good players around you, and you better work really hard and get really good, or you're just not going to play. And I feel like, that the guys that end up making it to the highest level, they have as much of that in their life as possible, that not just the competition, but just the constant need to get better and not getting anything handed to them. And so when I tell kids that story, they're kind of surprised, especially nowadays when everyone wants to hand out, everyone wants to know they're going to be starting at this position. I mean, I talked to D1 coaches last week who have guys playing in positions because if they don't play there, they're going to leave and go to a different school because of NIL money. And it's like, I get it to a certain extent, but it's at the same time, it's like, I know that those experiences are what make you really good and really resilient and a good competitor. And if I didn't have those experiences growing up and I didn't have to go into Maryland and beat 5 guys for the job, it's like, I don't know where I would be at. So part of it kind of gets me frustrated for the kids, because a lot of kids with the transfer portal, a lot of kids with moving around now with all the travel teams, they never really have to beat anybody out or see that competition. They just want to get to the highest level, get handed something and play. And it's just not what happens in the real world for anybody, So if you're constantly looking for that, you're just going to keep getting disappointed. And that's what I tell a lot of kids. It's like, whatever team you want to play for, or whatever the hardest, team that you can actually get in there and play on, you have to be there, because if not, you're not going to grow.
Yeah, I think the adversity piece is something that a lot of people don't necessarily take into account in their success, right? Like, by and large, if you're playing at a super high level, and make no bones about it, like even if you're playing Division III baseball, like it's only 8% of people that are playing college baseball. Like, you're an outlier to begin with.
Oh yeah.
So, there's 92% of people that aren't even playing in college. And when you get to that level, like the margins are so thin, and like, I used to say this to my guys all the time, like, it doesn't get easier when you level up. Like, you went from high school where it was probably a little bit easy for you because you're likely one of the best players on your team. And you got to college and you're like, oh shit, I'm not one of the best players here. Like, I haven't been in the weight room. I'm 18 years old, 17, 18 years old, playing with 21, 22-year-olds who have been in the weight room for 4 years. Like, my physicality is not there. I don't have the same understanding of the game. My baseball IQ is lower than everyone else. The speed of the game is a lot faster. If you're lucky enough to go play pro ball, like, it doesn't get easier in pro ball. There's less people playing pro ball, and they're better. And like, you keep leveling up. Like, if it was easy, we wouldn't have a shade over 23,000 people who have ever played in the big leagues since the 1800s. Like if it was easy, everyone would be able to do it, and it's not. And I think that so many times, especially nowadays, like it's people want things handed to them, but also don't understand that this is not a game in which you can just be handed the shortstop position or center field or catcher or whatever position it is on the field, and you're just always going to be the guy. Because if that's the case, you're not being challenged enough to be able to get to where it is that you need to be as a player. Because you're just like, there's no challenge to that whatsoever. And I look back on, my career, and, I played with a lot of really, really good players. And I know Andy did, like even in high school with the Dodgers. I mean, Johnny Nicola played it. He was a career 345 hitter in the ACC. And Joe Mahoney played in the big leagues. And Cam Brown was one of the best players in Richmond's history. And, we had a ton of guys who played Division III college baseball who were all Americans who were really good. But it challenged you to actually get better, because it's like, well, like if these guys are going to do the work, like I should probably put in some extra work to do this. And then when you get to college, it just becomes a little bit easier to be in that environment. Not to say that it's easier because you went through that, but you understand the work ethic that you need in order to get on the field, right? Like, okay, yeah. I've already done this before. Now I'm in a similar spot. Now I'm just lower on the rung. I have to go outwork everyone it is that I need to outwork so that I can play. And that is lost, I think, for the most part, in all of college athletics, but especially in baseball. I just think that people want, instant success. And this is a game in which you can't find instant success all the time. Like, are there dudes out there who can just roll out of bed and hit? Yeah, there are, but they're few and far between. Like, a lot of people need to put in time to be really good at this stuff. And I don't necessarily, I think that we're doing people a disservice and not getting them to embrace that adversity that they need, that will ultimately benefit them in the long run.
Yeah. I mean, I think you need it. I mean, not to be cliche, but Jordan got cut from his JV team. I mean, people think it's a mistake. I could run down a list of all-stars and professionals and college guys that I played with that have the same story, and it's not a mistake, right? It's like you need to have that adversity. You need to fail over and over again to get to where you want to go. And for people that think you're just going to keep going to the next level and keep being really good without putting the work in, it just doesn't happen. I mean, I've played with guys from my first year in pro ball all the way up into the big leagues. And when you constantly are with people for a full season, you see the work that is put in, and you see the ups and downs. Like, you see the best hitters in the game going through it and grinding after games in cages, early in cages. You realize like they're not that much better and more gifted than you. They just wanted a lot more, and their whole life has been adversity, where when it hits, they don't shy away from it, and they accept that this is just what the game is and what life is, right? It's not, once adversity hits, oh man, Judge never had to deal with this, or whoever, Shohei never had to deal with this, or Bueller didn't have to. Like, it's just a different mindset. Those guys move up so fast in baseball, and you can move up really fast to the big leagues, but every single one of them hit a roadblock where they go, okay, this is my limit. And it's like, I can either stop now and not put in the extra work, or I need to figure out how I'm going to get this much better this offseason. Because if I don't, and I go back into spring, my job's going to be gone. That's the difference. Is like, when you get to the higher levels, there's always people coming behind you. And Chef would always talk about this. Like, if you don't want to put in the work and get better this offseason, we have a freshman coming in next year who was top 10 in the country, and he will. Or there's somebody coming in the pen next year who really wants to be a closer and has that vision. And he got cut from his freshman team and his JV team and his senior and his varsity team. And he got here and he thinks that he's maxed out, but he's going to give it everything he got, and he's going to take it from you, right? Like, there's always guys coming, and it's a thing. It's a known thing in the big leagues, but just in professional baseball anyway. It's like, there's always a guy that will take your job, no matter what, no matter if it's a month from now, a year from now, 10 years from now. There's always a guy that's coming through that's like, man, I want to take his job. And I feel like I was lucky to have that feeling my almost my entire life. Even going to South Troy when I was 14 years old, I got picked up. I don't know if it's still a thing. You guys can let me know if it is. But back then you'd pick people up for regionals, or you'd pick people up for different tournaments. And I remember getting picked up for South Troy. I think I was 14 years old. And I don't think I even played for like the whole regional. I was just there as a bench guy. And that had never happened to me before. Obviously, when you're playing Little League, everyone plays. I was lucky enough to be good enough as a kid. I was never the best player on my team, probably until high school. And I always just played up. My dad always made sure I played up, so that wasn't the case anyway. But going over there and sitting on the bench, I remember riding home, my dad like, man, this sucks. Like, I don't want to do this, And it wasn't like oh man, the coach should be playing me. It was more of like, what do I got to do so next year I'm not sitting on the bench? So like, I'm not that guy. And that was just, I credit South Troy and I credit Columbia and I credit Maryland for that mentality, because if it was just handed to me, I would have never got that. And when you get to a spot in your career where you're like, I got to dig down deep and I have to do something different, or I have to do something more to get what I want, like, you don't know where to go. You've never been through it before. It's a lot easier if you had that experience early in life to then bring it to that next level, like you're saying, versus being a spot where you're in AA and you're facing probably the top 1,200 players in the entire world. And now you have to figure that out. It's a lot harder.
Yeah. As a college coach, I got to realize that the first 6 months of kids on campus will tell you a lot about how their career is going to play out for exactly the reasons that you're talking about. And it's the kids who have that kind of a backstory, or the multi-sport athlete who played another sport well, but they weren't the best player. And they're either forced to be kind of a piece of the puzzle as opposed to the star. So they know what it's like to work. They know what it's like to not be number one. Or the kid who has kids who have similar story to you. They're like, hey, they might not have made varsity until they were a junior, and they got a little bit of a chip on their shoulder. Those guys were able to come into a college setting, which I definitely want to touch on with you, which is completely foreign to high school baseball. The practices are different. The intensity is different. You're playing with grown men. There's a lot of stuff that gets thrown at you. And the guys who've had some adversity, who've had to work through things, they handle it so much better. And they're able to continue to develop as opposed to getting stagnant. And if you're stagnant as a freshman, to your point, there's a whole other class of guys that are coming in behind you. And if you can't find a way to do something that the team values, it can, it kind of dictates what those next 3 or 4 years look like for guys. And just in my experience, if those 6 months didn't go well and those kids weren't prepared, it usually didn't work out the way that those kids wanted it to work out, because those first 6 months were a real slog for them and they didn't really know how to get back on their feet.
Yeah, I mean, it makes a bunch of sense to me. I mean, that's been my experience as well. And look, some kids never go through it, right? Either they had a dad that played, maybe they just had really good practice and they were getting really good really fast, and then they just kept it up and they kept working and they never kind of let anything catch up to them. And then all of a sudden you look up and 6 years later they're in AAA and they debut. Like, there's a bunch of stories and a bunch of kids that's happened to. But the problem is, you don't see all the work they're putting in behind the scenes. You don't see how many more hours they put in when they were 13, 14, 15, 16, just playing baseball nonstop, working out, training. You don't see that. And so from the outside, if you're a kid starting, you're like, dang, this guy's 19 years old in the big leagues. Like, I'm 13. I'm going to be there in 6 years. I got a short trip. Like, I'm going to do it. And then you realize, well, are you willing to put in all the work and all the time that it takes to be someone like that? And if you aren't right away, the game's going to humble you, where either you have to, or there's going to be someone come in and take your spot, right? And so it's just, which one of those are you going to let get to you first? Are you going to learn about the adversity and learn what it takes to get to that level? Or are you going to get to the level and you're not ready for it? And then the game will sort like kind of feather you out, and everyone will know. And that's just kind of how baseball is. And that's how life is. I mean, you guys know, after the game, you're in it for yourself and you're either going to do it or you're not. And so just having those resources early and getting put in those situations that, you have to become a new version of you. You have to get better at this, or you have to get better at that. You're just not going to play. as much as you don't really want your kid to go through that, or as a kid, it might feel a little uncomfortable. If you have dreams of playing in college or playing in professional baseball, that's going to be every month of your life. That's what you're signing up for. So the earlier that you can get in situations like that and feel comfortable and know that's what the rest of your life is going to be as a baseball player, the better.
I think the one thing too, Andy talks about this quite frequently, that, and you're hinting at it and you're driving at it, but what a lot of people don't understand is once you get to college and especially in pro ball, like your biggest competition is in your dugout, right? Like it's not the other team realistically. Like, sure, you're going to go out and compete, you want to win, but in order for you to continue to stay on the field, like your competition is in your dugout wearing the exact same uniform that you are. And I think that's hard for a lot of people to kind of wrap their minds around, because your whole life you have been the guy from Little League all the way on up. Like there really hasn't been anyone close to as good as you. And, that's probably how you've gotten to the point to where you are. But then when you get to college or you get into pro ball, it's like, okay, these guys are just as good, if not better. And what am I doing in order to make sure that I'm keeping my job? And those things I think are really where people get jammed up in the process. Once they kind of get to that level of like, okay, I've made it, now what? And it's like, well, you're on the team. Like this doesn't guarantee you playing time. This doesn't guarantee that you're going to have a single at bat or a single inning pitched. Like you need to go out and now you need to prove it at that level. Otherwise, someone else is going to take your spot and you're just going to find yourself shuffled all the way down the roster to potentially being off said roster if you can't do what it is that you're being asked to do. And especially in today's game, because it's you can transfer with impunity. But like you get to that point, it can very quickly spin up on you to like, you're the fifth shortstop and you have 0 at bats. And the only time you're going to have any semblance of being able to showcase what you can do is during live BP and maybe some inner squats. And you better be really good if you want to move up that list. Or you have to be willing to put your nose down and just go work and try to outwork the guy in front of you and then outwork that guy that was in front of you once you jump somebody. And I think that's hard for people to kind of wrap their minds around, of like, my teammates are now my biggest competition in what it is I'm doing.
Yeah, I think the competitive nature of any sport is just so underlooked. I've seen teammates talk about this to guys that are now in their hometown. Everyone kind of has a similar view. I would almost never want my kid to be the best player on his team, and not from like I don't want him to be good standpoint, but like I would always want him to feel like he's not that good. And the guys that always have that from an early age, I just feel like it prepares you for the rest of your career. It's really easy to like baseball if you're a 12-year-old on a 9-year-old. Like imagine how fun baseball would be, right? If you're Juan Soto or Aaron Judge in Little League and you're like, this is great, man. I never get out. Every game is great. Like that only lasts for so long. And I feel like the quicker that you can flip that to, man, we have 5 bad games in a row and then 1 good game. Like that's where the learning comes in, right? And so the quicker that you can get in that mindset, the better. Because just like you plan out, think about going to college and you're the freshman, you have to beat out 5 guys and you beat them out. Like, do you think they just go away, or they're not on the team, or you don't have to continuously beat them out every single day? Like as you move up, you're with more guys that want to get to the next level. The pot shrinks. Everyone has the same mindset. You're inevitably taking not food off the table in college, but you're taking away, what they want and what they've worked so hard for, right? And so that's just continuously going to keep happening throughout your career. And you just have to have the mentality that that's what the game is. That's life. Like in any career or whatever it is, if you pass somebody, they're going to want to come back and pass you. And in baseball or sports, it's just elevated to that next level of, yeah, you won the job today, but if you go 0 for 12, your job might be gone next week, right? And so it's just a constant battle to get better, to prove yourself. And a lot of guys just aren't ready for that, and that's fine. Or guys don't want to do it, that's fine. But that's the reality of it, and that's what it takes. And the quicker that kids kind of get that into their head, and I'm not talking to play Little League. I'm all for having fun and playing Little League. But if you want to make a career out of it, or if you want to get paid to play in college, or you want to get a scholarship to play a game, whether it's baseball, basketball, football, it takes that mind shift of like, okay, I got to get to work. It's going to be really fun if you put the work in and you're good, but you got to flip that mindset to like, you're constantly competing with your own team and for the players on your team. And I don't even know, what is it, 34 guys on a college roster. You can play 11 at a time. Like it's not easy, and everyone wants to be in the game and everyone wants to play. And they were all the best player from their high school, and they're going there with the same mentality that you of, I'm going to win this spot and I'm going to get to the big leagues and I'm going to get drafted. And so you got to separate yourself. And there's a couple ways to do that, but you got to be willing to at least do one.
We had Nick Ponteri on recently, and I thought that he said it about as concisely as you can say it, that the fun is in the competition.
Mm-hmm.
And you learn that quick, especially when you get to college, which is what I want to ask you this here is, what were some of the things that your transition into college, what were some of the things that you had to figure out pretty quick to not get lost in the mix? Like, what was that learning curve for you when you stepped on campus? The stuff that might have got you hung up a little bit, and then other areas that you felt like you were pretty comfortable?
Well, like I said, I was just lucky that I had to do that even earlier. I mean, since I was 14, I was probably not the top 2 or 3 players on my team ever, unless, obviously maybe my senior year of high school, or when I was 16 playing for South Troy. I'd like to think I was at least the top 3, but for most of my career, I wasn't the top guy. And so I was constantly seeing what other guys were doing. I mean, back then social media was just coming on board. Probably the worst content you could look at and the worst instruction was online, because no one really knew what was going on still. But I mean, still back then, I mean, sitting in my basement, trying to get better, looking at guys like Justin Yurichek, looking at, guys like Tyler Hart when I would play in high school. Like, I always had guys that I was looking up to that were just one step above me, saying, all right, what do they have that I don't have? And how do I get that? Or what do I have to do to get on that level? And so I was just lucky that I had guys that kind of had that mindset around me since I was little, and always played up and always played in positions where I probably wasn't good enough to play there yet. Just like Glass, when you said I was on the 18U team, like I probably wasn't in a position to play there, but luckily, guys in South Troy and Kevin Rogers and George Rogers saw the potential in it and was like, no, this will be good if he fails for a little while. Like, we need him to see what it's going to take. And the player, because back then you had no clue. You couldn't go on Twitter and see the top 100 players. I think Perfect Game was just starting to get around, and I was 1100th on the list of 2014 grads or whatever it was. And so you could see the names above you, but maybe they had a video of them, but you didn't know what it looked like. You didn't know what they were doing, what their physicality was like. You had no idea. And so the only way you knew was by going on a team like South Troy and getting around the country and seeing guys, like going to Jupiter and seeing all of these guys that are going to be number 1 draft picks next year, or having the regional up at South Troy and having guys come in throwing 93, 96 and realizing you didn't even see the ball and it's in the glove, right? Like, just challenging yourself to that standpoint. I feel like I was always kind of in that group of, yeah, I'm pretty good. I was really undersized. I was a good athlete, but I was just always playing some sort of sport. And so that kind of got me to the level where, okay, I can go to college and get a shot. Going into Maryland, I mean, Chef told my dad up front, like, I'm 5th on the depth chart. We'd love to have you. I think you have potential. And credit to him for seeing it. But he's like, if you come here and work how I think you're going to work, and this is after meeting me for a day, he's like, I think you're going to be pretty happy in the summer of 2017 when it comes and you get drafted. And I remember just on the way home, my dad, like, it wasn't even a thought in my mind. I was still trying to make a varsity baseball team. Like, I always had end goals and I always wanted to play in the big leagues, but I was never driving my decisions. It was always like, okay, I want to be the best player on the field next year on this team. Like, what do I have to do to do that? And so getting to college, I mean, I was super undersized. I lifted weights in my basement and went to Brian Matthews a little bit at Feld's gym, but I was super undersized. Like you said, I was probably 160 pounds when I walked on campus. I could hit homers in high school, but doing it in college is a whole nother beast. And so, getting in the weight room was a huge thing. And just like Keith said, like the constant grind of constantly competing every single day in practice, it's something that you're not really used to in high school. You have your guys that are playing, maybe a couple guys are cycling through the lineup. I mean, in college, you're trying to win that series and the best 9 guys are going on the field. And it's like, if you're not the best 9 tomorrow, you're out. And so it's just that constant competition. And having that just constantly in the back of your mind is something that I was lucky enough to have growing up. And I'm thankful that I did, but a lot of guys didn't. And so, getting through that part of like, dang, every single day I show up here, I need to put on a show. I need to have my A game. I have to be rested. I got to have all this stuff going for me. Is definitely like one of the biggest learning curves you have to go through when you get into college baseball.
Yeah, I think that it's one of the, I think everyone has that initial reaction, right? Like I remember when I got to college the first time, I was like, yo, I don't even know what a double cut is. Like, the field we played on in high school? I mean, mine was a little bit bigger than yours was, but like you ain't running double cuts on that field. Like I had no concept of that. Like first and third defenses, I didn't know what I was doing. We had like 7 different buntees. And just like that initial, for lack of a better term, like culture shock when you get there and trying to figure that out as fast as you possibly can be overwhelming for a lot of players. And I mean, I was a catcher, so I had to know all of that stuff, right? Like, if you're a shortstop, and not to diminish the position, but like you kind of just got to know where you need to be on each specific play. As a catcher, like I need to know where everyone is supposed to be, what guy's charging, what guy's not, where the ball's bunted, and then read runners on where we're like, that can be overwhelming for a lot of people. And it's something that I think gets, I don't want to say overlooked, because as coaches, we know that, right? Like, hey, it's there. Like it's just going to take a little bit more time for him to make that jump. But there's something in that work ethic, in that adversity piece where like, I would get pissed at myself. And I remember my freshman year, Rakuya pulling me aside and being like, yo, stop getting so down on yourself about this. You need to make a confident call. If you're wrong, we'll live with it. But I would rather you be wrong here in practice than when we're playing Lemoyne in the 7th inning of, the game 3 and we need to win it. Like, let's be wrong here. And it made it easier on me to not have to be perfect 24/7, 365, right? Like it was more like, okay, there's a process to this. Like, let's fail and see what happens. If I make the wrong call, like nothing bad happens in practice. Like sure, you might get jumped after you do it the 15th time in a row, but like, you make the wrong call. It's like, yo, why'd you make that call? Like, I thought, like, I didn't think that Andy was going to get the third quick enough to be able to spin and get that out. So I just wanted to take the out at first. Like, okay, done and done. Like, right decision. Maybe in a tight game, maybe we cheat a little bit further and we try to get that out. But I think, one of the things that we try to impress upon a lot of people is like the baseball IQ standpoint. And, like you can grind all you want, right? Like you can be really good and you can go have high exit velos, but understanding how to play the game, I think, is something that is one of the biggest roadblocks especially for younger guys, of like, it's not high school baseball. It's a faster game. Dudes throw it harder. They hit it harder. They run faster. Doubles in the gap are no longer doubles in the gap. They're singles, right? Or they're caught. So like it's understanding how all of that works and how you can figure out how you can continually work yourself to the next level. And I think that, the theme here is the adversity piece, but like it's understanding that it's okay to fail in this game, especially from a practice standpoint. Like you don't go in the cage all the time and be like, okay, I'm going to take 100 swings and all 100 of them are going to be the exact perfect swing that I'm looking to get off every single time. Like, yeah, you're trying to get it off, but is it going to happen every time? No, it's not. But being okay with that and understanding what it is that you need to do in order to get to that point as you continue to get up. And like, you know, I've seen it. I've watched my guys do it. I watched you do it when you were in pro ball, when, you know, we had that, you guys had that, the spin machine, and we'd set it up. You'd set it up off, you know, off center and just let it rip. And you know, you're not finding success 100 out of 100 times, but we're like, the more you do it, all of a sudden, the better you get at facing a lot of this stuff. And there's a process and a work ethic behind it that I think gets lost on a lot of people when they, like, for what just the bare minimum of getting into college is, and what the bare minimum of what you have to do when you get there, right? Like, you're likely, like, if you're going to college baseball, the vast majority of people are probably doing at the very most the bare minimum of what they're going to be asked to do when you're a freshman. Right? Like, you know, we're talking weight room, we're talking 6 days a week practice. We're talking, and we're not talking like 2-hour practices. Like, we're talking 3.5, 4-hour practices where we're going to take live BP and we're going to do full on team defenses, and we're putting in defensive plays, and, you know, we're putting pressure. Like, it's all like, you need to be in shape just to practice. Like, if you're not in shape to practice, you're in no shape to even go play in a game. And like, I lived it. Like, I know who you guys played for. Like, I know what those practices look like. Like, you need to be in really good shape to do it. And you had a head coach who, like, by the way, is an absolute monster in the weight room and probably still is. So like, that adds an extra component to it. Like, yo, Chef is outworking me in the weight room. I should probably get after it a little bit more. Like, I remember working at camp with that guy, and after the camp, he went down and was squatting on the squat rack afterwards. And I was like, yo, I didn't get to play for this guy, but this is awesome. Like, what a different cat. And like, I have nothing but respect for the guy, you know, but like, that adds an extra component to it that I can't imagine as an 18-year-old, like, watching your head coach just out rep you in the weight room. Like, you know, but my point in this long-winded thing is that I, like, you know, you're driving at a lot of things of like, it takes more than just the absolute bare minimum to continue to play, to continue to be good, to continue to level up. Like, you need to find that, like, the margins are so thin. Like, I need to outwork not only everybody that's behind me, but the guys that are coming behind me as well.
Yeah, I mean, everything you said is spot on. I still remember, I mean, would it be helpful to run through like a day at Maryland and what it was like? Would that be helpful?
Yes, it would.
So this is just like a normal fall day at Maryland. 5 o'clock lift. So we were getting up anywhere from like 4:20 to 4:30 so we could eat breakfast. Maryland baseball was not what it is today. So we always got last pick on when we could lift. And then your practices are so long in the afternoon. So we shared the gym with girls lax, boys lax, which were both, I think, top 5 in the country, and then girls and guys soccer as well, which were both top 5 in the country, which was awesome because we saw a bunch of championship trophies going through. We saw what it took. Like, that whole culture thing is super real. But we had such long practices in the afternoon that we had no time to lift any time else. I would talk to Chef about it a bunch our junior year. So we had 5 a.m. lifts, and Chef was in there lifting probably more days than not with us, which to coaches out there and what I've seen, like the coaches that live it with players, like you get the buy-in, right? If you're sitting at home and you're coming in and you're never lifting and you're never doing the stuff that sucks with your players, like you're not going to get the buy-in. You got to live with how you want them to live. And like all the best coaches that I played for do that, not just in the weight room, just if you're out grinding, they're out grinding. If there's stuff that needs to get done, they see you putting in the work. Like all of that stuff matters for player buy-in. Most of the time, if you can't get player buy-in, it's not because of the player, it's usually because of you, and they don't respect you because they don't see work that you're putting in. They don't see that you care about them or that you care about yourself or your family, how they think that you should. And so all of that stuff plays a factor, and Chef was super, super good about that. But yeah, 5 a.m. lift until about 6:30, 7 o'clock. I mean, I remember our warm-ups were about 30 minutes. We had a psycho strength coach who was the man. 2 of them, actually. They were both awesome. They ended up going to LSU and Florida State. And they were awesome, but we got ripped apart. And so it'd be till about 7:30. All of our classes were from 8 to 12. So 8 to noon were classes. And we got to pick our classes early because we only had 4 hours a day because of practices and travel and whatnot. So we go to school from about 8 to 12, maybe 1:30, maybe later, like some business school classes you couldn't get in. So you had to get an okay and get out of practice for 2 days a week. By 1 o'clock, it was baseball until 6, 7 o'clock. You'd have early hitting on the field. Your team warm up would probably be around 2:30. You'd warm up and then you'd probably practice from like 3 to 6. And it was like you said, you do a team D every day. You would do infield every day. You do outfield. You do cuts, whatever it was on the plate, and then you would do some sort of offensive game, live BPs, inter squad, whatever it was. Get done around 6:30. Hopefully grab a bite to eat, go get your study hall hours in. We used to have to do, I think, 2 hours of study hall a day until you got on honor roll. So if you were good in the weight room after your freshman year, you could get out of it. But freshmen had to put in 2 hours a day. So then we go right from there to study hall, usually from about 7:30 or 8 until 10. And then you get home, hang out with the boys for a few minutes, and then you're dead tired. So you're asleep and you're up again the next day at 4:30. And that was just continuous for 3 straight years. Obviously in season, it's a little different, right? Because you're playing games, you're traveling. We would kind of segment our lists compared to what we had that week, what opponent it was, were we traveling, were we not? But that was a pretty standard day for 3 years of just day in and day out doing it. So that was like kind of a day in the life. But back to what you were talking about, Keith, is like when you talk about failing, I always use the analogy that everybody that you see that's in a spot that you want to be in, they all failed the exact same number of times. Whatever they were trying to do, they all failed the exact same number of times, and it's probably 10 times more than what you think it is. And if you want to wait and you want to delay the failing until later, you can. But I think it's better to get out of the way early and to just fail as much as you can when you're starting and as much as you can when you're the freshman. The more you have to fail to get to where you want to be in life. And so if you keep delaying that and you keep being the best player on your team or not pushing yourself or not going on, doing the thing that makes you scared or not playing the best competition, that's fine. You just got to know that later down the road, before you get to where everyone else is getting and where they want to be, you're going to have to go through those failures, because that's the only way that you can learn and you can grow into a player that a coach is like, okay, I want that guy on my team. And that's kind of what I tell a lot of young players, is to reverse engineer it and say, if I'm a coach, what kind of player would I want to put out there today to go to bat or to go on the mound? Like what kind of characteristics are you going to look for? And they can rattle them off very easily. Like everyone knows what that looks like, right? It's somebody who isn't afraid to fail, who's failed in the past, who has the experience, who put the work in, who probably had to go through some adversity, but somebody who, when they're working and it's practice time, they think of themselves as probably the worst player on the team. And when it's time for competition in games, they think of themselves as the best player on the team. And that's what all the best players do, is when they're working and when it's not 7 o'clock and the lights aren't on, they don't think of themselves as Aaron Judge or the all-star. They're putting in work saying, if I don't keep doing the actions that got me here, I'm not going to be here very long, right? Like, it's not you. It's not Kevin Smith. It's not Keith Glasser. It's not Justin. It's only the actions that you do and the work that you put in. And if you stop doing those actions or you stop doing the work, then you're not going to have whatever you have right now because of those actions that you took before. So the sooner that you can kind of understand that and be like, okay, this is the type of player that this coach would want, and this is what they need. What do I have to do to be that player? And then what do I have to continuously do to make sure that I stay that player? It's usually a little bit easier to kind of see that roadmap and to get on it a little quicker.
Yeah. It's a hard thing to, when you're 14 or 15 years old, I think it can be hard to put yourself in that mindset, right? And you're going through this process, and the easy path is oftentimes the one that's more desirable in the moment. But I think there's a lot of kids who are going through the process right now. Don't be scared of the failure. Don't be scared of the no, right? People are going to tell you no throughout this. But to your point, Like if you've got goals, if you've got things that you want to work towards, you're not going to get there without putting in the time and the effort that's required to do it. Right. And like you just walked through a day at Maryland while you were there. It doesn't differ that much at any other place, specifically at the Division I level. And I can say, having coached at the Division III level, and Keith did as well, it's not terribly different there either, because the guys who want to be good, they put in that time. It may not be all coach oriented, right? But the guys who are really good are going to show up 2 hours before practice to get their work in. The guys who really want to be good, they're going to be in the weight room, right? They're going to take care of that kind of stuff. And, going back to Cullen real quick, like Cullen was one of those guys that he would meet me down at the field at 7 a.m. so he could get 45 minutes worth of hitting in before his 8:30, because he knew he wasn't going to be able to get down there before practice because he had another class that was going to bump right up. It's not a coincidence that he, made it up to AAA, right? Like he did that kind of stuff. And the guys who are really good and really successful, eventually they figure out that's kind of what has to happen. It's not really negotiable if you want to figure out how good you can be at this game.
Yeah, I think Nick Saban says it best. He always talks about the illusion of choice and how you may have this really, really huge goal that looks really far away. And, you say to yourself, man, like there seems to be like a million things that I can do to get to this goal, right? It's so far. I'm 14 years old in upstate New York. I want to play in the big leagues. It seems like there's just a million things that I have to do. There's a million different ways that I can go. And Nick Saban always says to his freshmen, like that illusion that there's choices or that you can do this or that and still get there, it's all an illusion. Everybody that's getting there and doing it are all doing almost the exact same thing. Like it takes what it takes. You can't cheat the system. You can't think of something that makes you not put the work in or not fail or not learn under adversity. Like all of those things make that path a path that you can actually go down. And so if you want to skip that, that's fine. But you can't tell yourself that you have all these choices and that, just like you said, it might not be coach driven, like your program might not require that. But I'm telling you, every other kid in the country that's going to be where you want to be is doing it. And so if you don't want to do it, that's fine. But don't not put the work in and then be like, well, why am I not playing? Or why am I not here? Or why am I not there? Like it takes what it takes. And like there's a bunch of video now of everyone saying their workout routines. There's big leaguers that talked about what they did when they were kids. And it's funny because everyone says the same stuff, right? Like they're getting up early. They were doing extra work. They never felt like they were good enough. They were always doing stuff and people were like, you're crazy. You need to rest. You need to do this. It's like, it's not a mistake and it's hiding right in plain sight for anyone to pick it up and do it. It's just, you have to have the courage and you have to really have that end goal in mind and a why of why I'm doing it, because you can't, like I said, there's no choices. There's one path, right? Like everyone goes down a super similar path work wise and how much time they put in. And to think that you're just this really good baseball player who doesn't have to abide by those rules is kind of silly. Like when you can see these players that are probably 10 times better than you all doing the same thing and you think that you're good enough to not do it. It just shows that you weren't really ready to be in that position, And so I look at that as like, it's freeing because no matter where you start at or where you are right now, you can just take it by the horns and go, okay, if I just constantly do these actions and I constantly put in this work and I'm constantly doing the right things, I can't do anything else other than succeed, right? You can kind of back engineer it and go, okay, if I need to do this, this, and this every day to get to where I am, if I do that, and that, I'm going to have a pretty good shot. And I would probably bet you'd be in the position that you want to be in. A lot of guys just look at it and go, oh, I want to be there. I'm here. I don't know how I'm going to get there. It seems so far away. And it's like, well, just hold on. Reverse engineer it. Where are you at? Where do you want to get to? What type of player do you want to be? What type of player does your coach need? And reverse engineer it from where you are. And then you just execute it every single day. And you have that end goal in mind that kind of keeps you on the path. I want to get here. Okay. If I want to get here, I probably have to do this, this, and this. Okay. And you can just kind of keep bringing yourself back to it. And you're 6 months or you're 12 months down the road and you're closer and you start getting momentum and stuff takes off. But you just have to make sure that you're kind of in that mindset and you have a really clear goal, because it gets hard. It's not always going to be easy, but if that can bring you back and that can keep you on track, it's all just a numbers game. If you can just survive another day or another month and you're still in the game and you still have at bats and you're still on the team, that's all you really need. And you just need to out survive everybody. And that's kind of the name of the game.
Yeah, that's a ton of sage advice for our listeners. Like there's so much to unpack there. I think kids are going to get a lot of value out of hearing it from somebody like you who made it to the pinnacle, right? Like you're one of an incredibly small population of people who've been able to put on the uniform and play in the big league level. And for someone like yourself to kind of speak it and having gone through it, right? Like if it doesn't hit home coming from you, I'm not sure if we're going to get through to anybody. Like you did all this and you made it to the pinnacle, and not everybody's going to get there, but to your point, if you want to play college baseball, like it's a pretty good place to start. So I know you're tight on time.
Andy, I know I need to throw in a Colin Large story for you.
Yeah.
He's your guy. When I was at Maryland, we played against him at St. Mary's, and what is it? Where was it?
William and Mary.
Yeah. I always say St. Mary's, and he always tells me I'm wrong. But when we played William and Mary, we went there, and I think they came to us first. And before every series, we'd always circle a guy. Chef would come in. We didn't have TVs and everything. He'd have like a piece of paper, and we would circle a guy on the lineup card, and we say, that guy is not going to beat us today. No matter what it is. If they had a guy who was good enough, we would circle him, and he would go, this guy's not beating us. If we have to walk him 4 times, we'll walk him 4 times, but he's not going to beat us. And it was Colin Large, who I didn't know at the time. And he came in, I think he went, I mean, you're gonna have to ask him when he comes on, but I think he went like 3 for 4 or 4 for 4, like had a killer day. And for the next 3 years, Chef brought this story up probably 10 times when we go into a day. And he goes, remember when I circled a guy at William and Mary and he killed us? We're not going to let that happen. Colin Large is not playing for this team. And he would always use his name. And so it was always funny. And then obviously I ended up playing with Colin for years and roomed with him. And we would always just talk about how I was like, dude, you're like Chef's nemesis, man. Like, I'm sure he's still bringing up Colin Large in Virginia Tech's locker room, telling the story about when he came in and we had him circled and highlighted. And I think he's still, I mean, he was incredible for 2 games in the midweek, but I had to throw that Colin Large story out. And it just goes to show, right? Like he was one of the best hitters that I played with. And it's not just because he was good. He was out there at 7 a.m. working. He would work after games. He would work before games. I mean, I have endless text threads with him, midnight, 2, 3 a.m. trying to figure out how we can get better, scouting reports on pitchers, thinking of how we can set different counts and how we can put ourselves in a better position to do damage. I mean, you name it, from 9 o'clock at night to 4 in the morning. I mean, and that just goes to show, like, it's not an accident or a coincidence that guys have success. It's just that they're willing to do the stuff other guys aren't. And I feel like that it feels good, especially if you're in a little town in New York or Wisconsin, knowing like if you just do the work and you do the right things, like that can be you. It does, you don't have to be in LA. You don't have to be in New York City. You can do all these little things and eventually it'll pay off. And so I always just like telling those little stories and hearing them from you about players, because like I said, every single guy that I know that had success has the same exact story, and so it's kind of cool to see.
Yeah, Colin, the amount of video that I got from him when he was in pro ball.
Oh, yeah.
That's just who he was. Like, he was a tinkerer. And I used to always have to be like, hey man, you don't have to overthink this. Like, he was somebody that you had to pull back a little bit. Because at times he was so cerebral with what he did. It's also what made him really good. He was really good with pattern recognition, understanding pitch mix. Like, he was a really good guesser. But yeah, like, and I'll talk to you about a guy real quick after we finish up. But yeah, Colin, there's a reason he made it as far as he did. He did a lot of that stuff. So, but before we sign off, I want to give you a second here. You got a glove company. Am I
I
correct?
do.
Yeah. Take a
I
couple
do.
minutes and tell the listeners about that.
Yeah, so I met last year with the Yankees, I met Matt Tallarico, who he would actually be someone that'd be really cool to have on. He started steelbases.com, and all the vaulting systems that you see around the country now, he didn't invent that, but he kind of started that whole movement. And Brooks Robinson used to do it in the big leagues. He learned it from people, but it didn't really catch on before Matt started doing it. And he brought it to, I think it was Dayton. I forget where he was at, but I think it was Dayton. And so he's a huge movement guy, and he's big on momentum, movement, the human body. Just a really good coach. Like he's really smart, but he can dumb it down so that like people like me can understand it. And he brought this new system of base running to college baseball where you're vaulting off first base, you're vaulting off second. It's really aggressive, putting a lot of pressure on the defense. And it kind of took off. I think he was in college for 4 years, and every year they had the stolen bases record. And the Yankees reached out to him, I think in 18 or 19, and he ended up working for the Yankees until this year. And now he's working directly under Craig Counsell for the Cubs. But he created steelbases.com. When I went to the Yankees, he was a guy that I was super interested to get to know. And we kind of hit it off, and we talked a bunch about base running, leads, how it can impact the game, how we can put pressure on the defense. So I got to know him pretty well. And, I had been looking at making gloves for a while. I was a defensive guy. I loved gloves. I loved defense. And he would always come to me with this problem that he can't find a good glove for his kids. And other teammates had problems, the same problems. And we were like, well, let's try to tinker with some stuff. So we spent over a year cutting up Wilsons and kind of doing these prototypes to figure out how we could just make a better glove for kids. Because you really only had a couple options. You could go with a Rawlings glove that is hard to break in. It takes forever. It has no modifications for a small hand. Or you could go with a cheaper glove that you could break in a little better, but the pocket never holds up. You can't really squeeze it right. And kids who just couldn't learn the proper way to catch, they weren't confident in their moves with the glove. They were just catching it wrong, and they couldn't really close it properly. And so those were really the only two options that we could really find. And so we were like, why don't we try to make a big league caliber glove made for kids? Like the thought is like, made by big leaguers, but it's designed for little leaguers. And so we spent over a year trying to find this Japanese kip leather. We finally found it over in Japan, and it's a super like premium luxury leather, but it's a little softer and it's way more malleable so that it kind of molds to your hand a little better, but it holds up great. And then we did a bunch of just little modifications, whether it's elastic finger loops behind the palm or the wrist lace is actually elastic as well. And so parents can put their hand in over the finger loops, break in the glove, hand it to their kid, and their kid can put their fingers under the finger loops, pull the elastic tight on the wrist, and the glove fits them perfectly. And so we were trying to figure something out where we can make it just easier for kids to learn to catch, make them like the game more, give them more confidence so they can kind of learn to catch and throw the right way and make transitions easier. And so we kind of just tinkered with the glove, tinkered with the design, made it for little kids. And then we said, okay, well, how can we get a big hand in here just to break it in for them? And then they can kind of take it from there. And it was kind of a hit right away. I mean, we made one for his daughter, and she started killing it, giving it out to her teammates, and everyone was doing better. They were more confident. They were excited to play. And it just kind of grew from there. And so now we're just trying to get the word out and trying to get them in the hands of as many kids as we can. And the thought process is just to make the game more fun and more accessible and have kids, be able to be confident early on, have a glove that fits them, that's made for them, that's designed specifically for them so that they can kind of learn the game a little quicker, enjoy it a little more, and we can just have more people playing the game.
What's the brand?
It's called Cali Gloves. You can find it on any of my social medias. I have in the bio. There's links all over the place. It's doing pretty good. We've given it to a bunch of my teammates, and they're saying that it's honestly better than some of the leather that they're getting in spring training. So that's kind of cool to get good feedback. But it's nicer than my Gamers. The leather is top notch. It's a glove you can use for years. You can break it in. We have a bunch of stuff to keep the pocket secure so it's not getting flat. Just a bunch of stuff that's really good for kids trying to learn. And so they don't have to focus on the glove falling off. They don't have to focus on it being too big. It fits on their hand. It feels really good for them. They get comfortable and confident, and then you start to see them play a little better and have more fun.
Well, I know what I got a 7-month-old, so that's going to be his first glove.
3 months, he'll be good. You can throw it right on and have it for 10 years or so.
All right.
Yeah, the red, white, and blue Franklin glove that Walker has as a 3-year-old is not conducive to fielding. Not to take a shot at Franklin, but it's exactly what you're talking about. We struggle with getting the ball in the glove while we're fielding. So
yeah, it's tough, man. It's tough.
It is. We can throw it, but the catch part is we're the work in progress. Work in progress there.
And that's the first skill you really want to play, right? Like everyone wants to be able to catch it and throw it. And so if we can just help a kid kind of learn that a little quicker and love the game and play it a little longer, then it's all worth it. So
listen, dad was as average could be as a hitter, but he could defend. So if there's anything my son's going to be able to do, it's going to be defend.
He can catch. He can catch. Exactly. Exactly. I'm right there with you.
All right, man.
We appreciate your time, man. I know you're a little crunch for time. We went a little bit over, but I'm so happy that you were able to join us tonight. The amount of stuff that you talked about tonight is invaluable, and I'm excited to get this out to the listeners. But I wish you the best in everything. Obviously, we keep in touch, but continue to not be a stranger in my world, and I won't be in yours. And thanks again for joining us, man.
Absolutely, man. You guys have a cool thing going, so thanks for having me on. I'm the B-lister, so I'll try to get you guys some A-listers down the road and get some cool people in here for you.
Not true. We're both members of the Columbia High School Athletic Hall of Fame. So in this podcast realm, we're A-listers, baby.
There you go, man. That's all that matters.
All right. Well, thanks again, Kev. Appreciate you, man. The time was awesome. I'm glad we got a chance to chop it up for a little bit.
For sure, man. I appreciate it. Thanks, Andy.
Thanks, everybody, for listening. Tune in next week. Thank you for listening this week. If you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and smash that like button for us. Check us out on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, as well as Spotify. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at EMD Baseball. If you want to find out what me and Keith do to help families and players navigate the recruiting process, go ahead and check us out on emdbaseball.com. Take a few minutes to check out our new online academy. I promise you'll get some good information out of that. Thanks again for listening. Check in with you next week.